that is now a very significant investment in our portfolio, and indeed the highest performing sector and particular stock we have in our portfolios. I think I'm up 2,000% or something.
Today, folks, Mindmed has proven to be Kevin O'Leary's best investment in 2020, and my conviction hasn't changed at all. I'm still holding my 8,300 shares strong into the future, with the next catalyst being the NASDAQ uplisting that we're all patiently waiting for, and it'll be neat to see if that opens any further floodgates to some other brokerage accounts that currently don't have access, including people like Robinhood investors out there. But today, we're going to listen to the most recent interview where Kevin O'Leary kind of goes in depth about this investment. We're going to kind of break this down, and I'm going to have some opinions along the way. So if this is something you enjoy, consider hitting that like button, and let's jump right into this.
Very early stage investment in Mindmed. And you are right, that is now a very significant investment in our portfolio, and indeed the highest performing sector and particular stock we have in our portfolios. I think I'm up 2,000% or something this year. I don't know. It's an absolutely huge sector now. And I think as a result of what occurred on November 3rd, the legalization of psilocybin in Washington, D.C. and Oregon State for research, this further catapulted the whole sector. Mindmed is now the leader in my mind because it has more molecules and more trials than any other company in the space.
It's at over $1 billion valuation now. By most definitions, it would be considered a unicorn.
Oh, I think it's well over $1 billion. Yeah, over. Yeah.
Well over. It was at $2 billion last week.
So even with the valuations that Mindmed currently sits at, with the under, I think it's sitting around 1.6 billion right now, I still think this is relatively conservative compared to other medical stocks in similar spaces. Even if you're comparing it to something like a CRISPR-Cas9, since it's about a $12 billion market cap, I'm honestly surprised that Compass Pathways is holding up as well as it is, considering it's kind of a one-trick pony, which obviously equates to a lot of the risk that Kevin O'Leary is mentioning here when he was looking for diversification in this kind of asset psychedelic class. But we'll keep listening because he does clarify farther on this.
More concerned about the stigma associated with LSD and psychedelics that are still prevalent, especially amongst the investment community, people who don't know about the space?
Those same investors who I called, because when I get behind a sector and an investment, I let everybody know that I'm going to be a spokesperson for it, because I'm a believer. And as an early diagnosed dyslexic, I was incredibly interested in the outcomes, because anecdotally you keep hearing about very positive outcomes in microdosing, particularly around LSD. And we haven't proven any of that yet. And the thing you have to realize about an investment like Mindmed, these are binary outcomes. You either get a zero or an extraordinary outcome, because the issues you're addressing, opioid addiction, depression, anxiety, and other afflictions of mental health, are huge markets for drugs if they end up working, or therapies. And so you really want to diversify your risk. And so what I really wanted out of, if I was going to deploy a significant portion of capital, to know that I had multiple molecules and multiple trials.
So as he stated, guys, the stigma aspect of this is almost mind-boggling, because when I first started buying into this and I started publicly talking about it, the two things I was most worried about was YouTube flagging my content and not letting me get ad revenue, which is actually something that has never happened. For how much I speak openly about these substances, YouTube has never flagged me. I get full ad revenue, which is absolutely wonderful. But also, like you mentioned, you kind of got to be willing to get kind of punched in the back when you're buying into sectors of the market that just aren't that appealing in the beginning to people. And I kind of been getting thrown under the bus because I sold my Tesla shares, and a lot of people say you're going to miss out on all the FOMO. There's so much buying going on right now. And I'm like, you got to remember, when I was buying into Tesla, there was no FOMO. There was a lot of hate. Tesla stock was tanking down to the 170 range, and it worked out pretty substantially well. I don't like buying into companies when everybody and their grandmother's talking about them. Usually that's my sign to skidoo, to exit, as Buffett says. When those are greedy, usually it's time to be a little more fearful, which is even what we saw with Mindmed, guys. After this moonshoot, this unicorn, we saw a lot of people taking profit. But if we were to take the Tesla valuation metrics, which means let's prove all the market capability into something in the future that doesn't exist today, and making my growth speculative bet, I still think Mindmed has a lot of room to run. But let's continue listening to see what else Kevin O'Leary has to say.
And so before doing Mindmed, I kind of did some due diligence on the other investment opportunities, because they weren't the only people calling me. And I found that JR's portfolio is very diversified. And I consider him now to be the leader of the space. I mean, he really has charted the course. He is a primary participant. And now those same institutional investors who said, "Oh, Leary, are you out of your mind?" are calling me up saying, "Why didn't you tell me?" And of course, I have the email that said, "Hey, I did tell you, and you still thought I was crazy." But I think you need to be prepared to get some arrows in your back if you're going to charge into a brand new sector, particularly in something like this, which is highly risky. And I'm telling people right now, do not invest in this if you think that it's not highly volatile. It is. But
and I state this as well, guys. Don't make an investment in this company unless you're willing to lose literally 100% of it. That was the risk that I took on, and sometimes it works out. And a lot of people might have been buying into that $5 and $6 range and are starting to regret it. But if you're regretting that investment decision, that means it probably wasn't the investment for you. But continuing on.
If you're making big bets for big solutions, then you need a portfolio of molecules and a portfolio of trials. And therefore, for me, that led me to Mindmed.
The millennials really like the Mindmed story. I have a friend of mine personally who's invested and he's done great with the stock. I'm 30 years old. So everybody my age is around 30 plus or minus 2, 3. Everybody I know who's involved in the markets is day trading. Everybody is going all in on either Bitcoin, some sort of crypto, penny stocks, the riskiest investments they could find, options on penny, just whatever you can think of that's risky, they're all in. That's what my generation's doing right now. Can you comment on this?
Yeah, I don't consider that investing.
Okay.
I mean, investing to me is taking long-term positions. The core bedrock for me is very conservative. I talked about OUSA. That's really boring, but that's majority of what I invest in. And then on the fringe, I'll do things like Mindmed or the Shark Tank deals, et cetera. But every once in a while, you get the extraordinary outcomes like the Mindmeds and many of my private companies as well. Plated sold to Albertson for over $300 million, et cetera. So, but the way I look at it is if you are, I understand the appeal of day trading, and I understand that but it's not investing. So you should look at it as you're willing to take some portion of your net worth and risk it because it could go to zero. You just don't know because I've never found it's impossible to time the market, and day trading is market timing. But what I've encouraged day traders to do is to take 10% of every time they get a winning position and invest it in core holdings, like pick some exchange traded funds that represent more conservative investments and just leave it there. And then every time you get another win, take 10%. And then what you find is over time, you start to grow a core base, that's investing. So, but I like the idea that people are learning about the market. I think that's great. I think, I don't day trade. I don't have time to do it. I don't understand why you'd sit there like a rabbit pushing buttons. I mean, if you have a good time, everyone needs a hobby. It's not investing.
This by far has to be the most methodical investment advice I've ever heard, because this is something that a lot of people recognize that I do, and I think it's a strategy that everyone should build into their portfolio, guys, which is basically, stick to those core holdings. Make sure you always have a backup plan of maybe the Johnson & Johnsons of the world, but also kind of gear into a speculative side of the market that you feel you understand. For some people, this is day trading, swing trading, options plays. For me specifically, it's high growth stocks, investments that I believe in when we're talking about things like Tesla, Canopy Growth Corp, Mindmed, obviously, and many of you have been aware that I scale these down. I just recently scaled out of Tesla after an 800% gain, and what I do is I just take that money and I allot it over into my super secure place, because that's how I continue to scale my passive income. Because at the end of the day, guys, I want to make dividend income while I sleep. And whether you're day trading, whether you're doing your homework on the Mindmeds of the world, you're still investing your time and energy. It's not like what we call 100% passive. So I always like converting my active investment income over into the passive side of my portfolio. And I think this has been an incredible interview, probably one of the best interviews I've ever seen Kevin O'Leary do on Mindmed. I'm glad that he opened up how much he's up on Mindmed, his conviction toward it, the fact that he had mental health issues as well, which is one of the convictions I think everybody has that usually gets into this space. There's some underlying reason of them wanting to change the world, like me. And I've noticed that a lot of people buying into it probably aren't buying into it for those reasons. And I'm going to finish up by saying what I said before, guys, about Buffett. Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful, though I don't know how that applies to a company like Mindmed that makes absolutely no revenue, but it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? So if you guys enjoyed this, you want to see further updates, including when I actually sell my Mindmed position or when I start scaling it down, consider hitting that subscribe button. But stay cool, stay awesome. I can't wait to catch you guys tomorrow.